Hey, I'm Seth Hawkins, and welcome to the CedTalks Podcast. My guest today is the CEO and founder of Everything for Everything There Is a Season. She is a mentor, a leader, an educator, an author, entrepreneur, and a mentor of mine. Right now, here is Dr. Tasheka Green. Dr. Green, welcome to the show.
For having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. You've been on my list for almost a year now. You know, there's been a lot going on between scheduling and timing, but hey, I'm so glad that I have you right here today on this 4th of July Monday. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, right off the bat, how are you feeling? I know that's a question that we always throw around and ask each other at the start of conversations, but right now, here in this moment, from a mental, physical, religious standpoint, spiritual standpoint, how are you feeling right now?
You know, that's a great way to start, because that is how I always start asking people, how are you feeling rather than how are you doing? Because when we ask how you're doing, you get so caught up in the things that we do day to day in our tasks. But when we talk about our feelings, we really talk about our emotions and giving ourselves permission to feel, you know? And so at this current time, Cedric, I am feeling very grateful. I'm smiling because I'm out here actually in Virginia. I had to take care of a matter, and it ended up actually being stuck in a 4th of July parade, right? So you just see all the families and everybody just celebrating together, coming together. And so, you know, that's something, just to hold this energy around this unity and togetherness is great. You know, as we have just celebrated Juneteenth, and now we're celebrating 4th of July, just to see the unity, everyone coming together with all the celebrations. So I'm very energized right now. I'm grateful. Again, I'm just grateful for all of the things that God continues to, you know, give me the responsibility of and entrusted me with. I'm very grateful, and always say have an attitude of gratitude and a posture of thanksgiving. So that's how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I like how you said that word unity and togetherness, because I feel like there's so much division in the world right now. People are divided on a lot of certain topics and things that are going on in the world. Just to have that sense of unity and to come together for opportunities and moments like this, or to be empathetic and, like you said, have that space to express your emotions and share your emotions, right? It's such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. You're right. You're so right.
Yeah. So with your brand, the company that you have, To Everything There Is a Season, talk to me about that. What was your reasoning for establishing it? What is your mission statement? And overall, what's the purpose of you continuing to carry out your business's mission?
Absolutely. So To Everything There Is a Season was actually birthed out of a book that I wrote in 2010. My mom, she passed away of stage 4 stomach cancer in 2010. She was 53 years old, had never been sick, and she was diagnosed in February, and 30 days later, she had passed away. She was having these symptoms, and it actually started with an ulcer, which was a bleeding ulcer that left her into a space of really not being able to eat and hold food down. And then when she went into the hospital, that's when they tried to do a surgery, and they saw that it had metastasized to her liver, and it was stage 4. And so out of that, actually, you know, my mom passed away in March of 2010. And then I gave birth to my daughter 2 months later in June of 2010. And with that being said, it just seemed as though every season something was taking place in my life. And so when I was in this space, what I call a dark space, because my mom had just passed, I was, you know, giving birth to her first, you know, granddaughter and everything. I really needed some help. And so I cried out to the Lord, and we know that when we cry out to him, he hears us and he comes to see about us. And I heard God said, just write. And so I started to write, and what I realized, although I was writing for therapy, for healing for myself, that it also was birthing something that I didn't even know. And so I wrote the book, To Everything There Is a Season, It's Your Season, Go and Live. And so with that being said, after I had wrote that book in 2010, 4 years later, God was like, it's time. And I was like, it's time. And I didn't know what it's time meant, but it was time for me to go and live. And I tell people all the time that my mother had to die so that I could live, because I was living this ordinary life, but God wanted me to be extraordinary. He wanted me to walk in those places that eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard. Neither had it entered into the hearts of men what God had for me, because of my love for him and my obedience. Because when I was in that dark space, he just said to write, To Everything There's a Season, It's Your Season, Go and Live. And in 2014, when I birthed that book, and I actually, had it published and everything and shared. That's what birthed To Everything There Is a Season. And so with Everything There's a Season, not only was a book, but it turned out to be a business. It turned out to also be a nonprofit because I provide scholarships each year in memory of my mom to students who are furthering their education career, because my mother believed in education as one of the values. Also, it birthed Women of Virtue Walking in Excellence, where I honor women every year and to keep my mom's legacy, because legacy is not what you accomplish, but it's what you prepared others to do. And so to honor her legacy, I honor women that have given back to their community and the world. So just from that experience, there's so many things. And my mere mission is simply to provide a professional, personal leadership and development to individuals and organizations to help them to discover and maximize their greatest potential.
Yeah, I liked how you were able to turn the pain that you were feeling, the pain of your mother getting sick and then ultimately her passing away. Thank you for sharing that and being transparent about that. I always think transparency is a beautiful thing in conversations, but I love how you were able to listen to God and listen to his word, and you took that pain that you were feeling and you poured that into your book, which eventually gave birth to the company and brand that you have, which has changed many individuals' lives. So I love how you were able to translate that and turn it into what you have now.
Thank you, Cedric. And I always say, my pain has birthed a passion-filled purpose. And so that's exactly what it has. That happened for me. My pain birthed a passion-filled purpose.
Yeah. Were you always knowledgeable of the gifts that you had as far as education and leadership skills, or did that take over time as you continue to develop into your career?
I say that when we have these talents are things that we are innately born to do, right? And so we have these different talents that we're innately born to do, that God has gifted us with, but we have to build them. We have to develop them. We have to strengthen them. We have to gain knowledge and understanding around them so that we can be masters at our craft. And so I just go back and I tell the story all the time of when I was a little girl that I used to play school. But not only did I play school, that, I would take my stuffed animals, I set it around the dining room table, and that would be their desk. And then I would move them all into the kitchen and act like I'm serving them, their food. And then I would take them to my uncle who had like this 1976 Chevy van, take them in the van and act like I'm driving them home. And this is what I did when I was a little girl, not knowing that, I was, going to be a teacher and then, an administrator, principal, and then a regional assistant superintendent, and now having my own business. But when I was dreaming in that at the time I was a little girl, I was encompassing all those things. I was encompassing me as an educator. I was encompassing me as, a teacher, as one that inspires others and serve others. And so I always tell people that, education is my calling. I always knew that education was my calling. Teaching is a gift. That's something I'm innately born to do. Inspiring is my passion, and serving is my purpose, because I do it all because I want to help, I want to support, and I want to make things go right for others and never a hindrance. So as you had asked the question, did I know that I was always born to be these things? Absolutely. We innately have these things. But over the years, we have to develop it. We have to build it, and we have to strengthen it so that it can become a strength.
Right. To follow up on that, how do people build upon those gifts or skills that's been put in them, whether they're, a young person like myself at 22 or even fellow adults listening right now? How do people build upon those gifts or skills? What's your advice on that?
Absolutely. So we have to develop it by training. It means we have to learn, right? And so everybody may not be that lifelong learner where you're sitting in a college and you're sitting in a classroom. That could be for some people's path, but others it could be just, what are you reading? What are you reading? What books are you reading? Are you reading books that's going to help you to strengthen and develop your talent and to grow in those directions? Are you surrounding yourself with people that are going to help to develop you in the direction that you need to go to? Are you listening to Thank You, Cedric podcast that are going to help to develop you? Are you attending webinars and seminars and conferences and things of that nature? And, and I always like to say, everything doesn't cost money. FREE, free is the best way to start, and so most times when we think about these things, people, equivalated to money, that you need money to do it. Absolutely not. I benefit from, reading, just getting, one of my favorite reads all the time is Harvard Business Review, that I sign up, and every day they send me these, business reviews that I read every day that would help with leadership, and that would help with coaching, and that would help with business. And it takes a few minutes, I always want to, meditate and pray in the morning, read my Bible in the morning, read my scriptures, and then I go to those other things that are going to develop what God has entrusted me with.
Right. And I've always done stuff like that too. Just try to put myself in situations and spaces where I can learn from the best, whether that's being at home and listening to a sermon or listening to a podcast or opening up my Bible and doing scripture, or through being at college and mingling with different professors and mentors and taking advantage of those networking opportunities. I think it's such a good thing for people to put themselves in those spaces where they can learn from the best, because as humans, we don't know it all. We don't have all the answers, but there are people who do have that wisdom, that do have that knowledge, and they're able to pass that forward on us. So that way we continue that circle or that cycle where we give back to that next generation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was reading scripture last night too, and it comes from Romans 12:6. It says, having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them, if prophecy, in proportion to our faith. And I was trying to figure out what to ask you or how to style this conversation, and then I was reading from Romans, and then that verse just popped out to me, having those gifts and making sure we use them efficiently and properly in proportion to our faith, and tying that in. So I think that's always an incredible thing, to lean on those gifts that the Lord has blessed us with and find ways to use them to our advantage in the right way.
Exactly. And in the beginning part of that, one word that stood out to me that you said was like grace, right? That unmerited favor from God. And so, I always tell people that I'm walking in my place of grace. I'm never in my happy place, but I'm always walking in my place of grace. It's that unmerited favor that God gave to me, nothing that I deserve, but he gave it to me because he entrusted me with this, and that knowing that I will do something that's going to always honor him and bring him back glory. And that's what it's all about. Like, I don't want the I, or I don't want, the Tasheka green, because the first letter in idolatry is I. Like, I never want to make it about me. I always want to make it about what God has given me and what he's entrusted me with. So many times people say, oh, you deserve it. No, I don't. Only thing I deserve is God's grace. Oh, it's such an honor. Nope, it's not an honor for me. It's an honor for God, because it gives him the glory. And so when we put God first, it says him in all our ways, and he will direct our path. I'm a living witness to that in everything we do, we acknowledge God and give him the glory, and he will direct our path.
Amen. Absolutely. Shifting gears from that, it's been about 3 years since the pandemic. I guess you could say we're still in it. Maybe we're out of it. But since COVID happened, the pandemic started. It's now 2023. How has the pandemic shifted your teaching style when you are mentoring and you're leading those workshops and you're working with other students and other teachers in this profession? How has the pandemic shifted your style over the years?
Well, yeah, so it shifted me because it was this one word that everybody was using during the pandemic, and it was empathy. Like, let's give empathy to the students, the teachers, the leaders, and the family. But what I learned to discover that it wasn't necessarily about the empathy, but the compassion. Because empathy makes you see something, but compassion makes you respond. See, compassion is empathy plus action. And so that's how it has shifted me, that I empathize with where we are, and I always say that it wasn't a learning loss, it was a loss of instruction. The students didn't lose their learning, it was the instruction. And because we, a lot of times we don't plan for the what if. Like, what if we had to go for 2 to 3 years virtually? What are we going to do? And we weren't prepared for that. We weren't prepared for the what if. We were walking in where we were now, but we didn't prepare for the what if. So it wasn't necessarily a learning loss for the learners. It was a shift in the mind of the educators, the leaders, the instructional leaders, so that we can know how to prepare for the what if. What if something else happens? How are we going to better prepare ourselves so that learning can continue for the students and teaching can continue for the teaching? And I always said that, the vehicle changed, but the driver didn't. And so the vehicle may have looked different for us in the pandemic, but the drivers didn't. And so how has it prepared me? It prepared me now to be more strategic as I'm preparing leaders, as I'm preparing teachers, as I'm coaching individuals, so that we can prepare for not just the now, but the what if.
Right, and then preparing for the future as well, because you never know when these situations like this will pop up or happen again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so with the pandemic and everything that has transpired and happened, which model of learning do you prefer, or teaching, I'd say? Teaching, do you prefer? Do you like this virtual model, or do you like going up to the places and being physical and being present with them?
Cedric, I really like it both blended. So I like the blended approach to learning, because with the blended approach virtually, I can reach so many more. I can reach, individuals in schools in, Japan. I can reach individuals in schools in New York, but also the face-to-face experience that lets you get and really get into the classrooms, into the buildings, and see exactly what's going on. Because instruction can take place, but the change takes place when we actually see what's going on, when we hear what's going on, when we can feel how the students and the educators are feeling. That's the impact. The ideal state is what we want to change to. So when you ask how to manage it and not to overdo so much, because sometimes we can get exhausted with the virtual too. And so we just need to know how to manage that blend, learners as well as the educators.
Right, exactly. It's that perfect balance of both. Like, I'm a fan of both also. Like, I love doing my virtual stuff, being able to hop on my laptop and do stuff like this, but that physical presence of being face to face and being able to see everybody's reactions to what you're saying as you're speaking on these certain topics, it doesn't get much better than that. As somebody who's been up in the front speaking on something, it doesn't get much better than that. But I am a fan of both, though, being able to do my virtual learning, right, and then being able to be present as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So shifting gears from that, I want to talk about, your life growing up as a child. You did speak about it a little bit with you playing as the teacher and doing all of that. But looking back on your childhood or your adolescence, what are some lessons that stick out to you that your family taught you? Any morals or values that you carry with you today that you instill in your own children or the people you mentor and work with?
Absolutely. So I would say that Maya Angelou said it best, but this is something that being raised by strong Black women who really valued, people, who valued their faith in God, who valued, serving and helping. And Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said and what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that's the takeaway that I always take away, even in moments where I, just can see myself maybe, like, oh my God, what is the world is going on, in those type of moments.
Yeah.
I always step back and provide something that people can learn from, or something that, will make them feel better and take away, never leaving people in a space of feeling less than, but really having them feel like something that they can take away from and they can value that, because of something you said, it made me feel a certain kind of way. And so that's the biggest takeaway that I learned as a child that I try to apply every day. We're not perfect and we should not try to be perfect, but it's about progression, right? And so each day we should progress about getting better. I always say that you practice until you get better, not until you get perfect. And so even in those spaces, practicing until we get better, making sure that we, show people we value them and that we walk away, that people feel better than they did when they were in our presence. And also, something I learned too is not afraid to say I'm sorry. When you're wrong, admit you're wrong, and not afraid to say you're sorry in those circumstances, because we know that, pride comes before the fall, right? That pride leads to destruction. And I always said that some things I probably could have had sooner than if I had just dropped my pride. And because I didn't drop my pride, I some things I think I lost along the way, or it was a delay because I was too prideful. And so all of those things I've learned, as an adolescent, as a youth, and even as still as an adult, of how to become a better version of me each and every day, because somebody's looking at me, somebody's counting on me, and I am an answer for somebody in the earth.
Right, exactly. When you look back on your education experience, do you have any teachers or professors that stick out to you as true mentors that help shape your perspective or your pedagogy or your style towards the field of education?
Absolutely. So I shared this, it was actually not until I got into college at Bowie State University, and there was a professor there. Her name is the late Dr. Barbara Talbert Jackson. And when I was going through my experience there, I was having some difficulties during that time. And I had went to Bowie, and when it was time for me to graduate, I could not graduate because I actually had a balance. And it was a pretty large balance. And I couldn't understand how I could go all the way through college and get to this point and not, and have this large amount. Like, what happened? Like, where did the ball drop? And so on. And so it got to that point, and I'm, being raised by a single mom, we weren't financially fit at that moment to take care of this balance. So it was like, you either pay this balance or you don't graduate and you don't get your degree until you do. And so I had went to, like I did every day, I always checked in with Dr. Jackson to see if she needed anything support to me. And she asked me that question, not how you're doing, going back to how you're feeling. And so I shared with her how I was feeling. And in that moment, I just broke down. And when I broke down and telling her what was going on with me, she said this to me, and it changed my whole perspective. She said, I see too much greatness in you to let this amount of money come between you and your destiny. She was like, I'm going to give it to you and you're going to graduate. And she blessed me with the money that I needed to graduate, not because of anything else, but she saw something great in me to let this hinder me from my destiny. And that to me was the most profound person and statement that has ever been said to me. People say, oh, you're smart and all of that. No, I'm not smart. I call it applied knowledge, that I just apply the knowledge that I'm learned. People say other things, you got so many great things going, but she said something that changed the trajectory of my destiny, because I was in a place where I was about to just say, I don't know what to do. I just have to wait and pay. And it wasn't a low amount, it was a very high amount. And it would have took a while to probably get done for me to get my degree and be like a certified teacher. And then, of course, a certified administrator. But she said, I see too much greatness in you to let this hinder your destiny, and poured and blessed into my life. Because somebody sowed in my life. And I said, God, if you bless my hands, I will always be a resource. And I learned that God gives seed to the sower. I lack nothing in my life because he's my shepherd. But sow it back because somebody sowed into mine. And her name was Dr. Barbara Talbert Jackson.
Wow. Thank you for telling that story. You did tell that story to us when we were working together last summer during the SEED program. But again, I thank you for that transparency and that context. It's such a blessing how God puts certain people in our direction or in our path, and they are vessels to us, and they are able to tap into us, and they pour those gifts out of us, and they pull it out of us, and they remind us and they show us just who we really are. And it's all because of him. He directs our path, and he put those people in our life and in our path for a purpose and for a season, because in everything there is a season, and that was your season to get blessed by that woman, and she was able to change the trajectory of your life. And so that's just incredible.
Yes, thank you, Cedric. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing that you said to me, you said a quote to me back in February, and I was going through the internship, and God, there was just so much going on. But you told me something, and it stuck with me as well. And it's a quote from Nelson Mandela, and he said, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." And so the one thing I took from that quote is that, in life, I'm going to stumble and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to fail, but I'm not going to lose. I'm going to learn from that situation. I'm going to learn something from it so that way I do win, but I'm not going to have that term analogy of lose in my vocabulary. It's a sense of learning, because when you learn, you're able to grow and progress. And with that progress, you are going to eventually win in the end. So thank you for sharing that quote. During my takeover week, I shared that with my fellow students, and they were able to say that back to me a couple of weeks later, and they remembered it. So I was like, wow, I can't believe they remembered that. But
yes, absolutely. That's phenomenal.
It's one of those quotes that definitely changed the trajectory of my life and how I try to live my life and try to handle things. So thank you for that quote.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Ted.
Yeah. So you come from high school. You're going through high school, getting ready to transition over to Bowie. What made you choose your major as education? Like, what made you decide that this is my major, this is what I want my career to be in? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, because, I won my passion for children, right? I love children. And even when I became a principal, when I interviewed my applicants, the first question I always asked them was, do you love children? And most of them actually would laugh. Like, what type of question is that? I like children. I said, nope, you answered it wrong. I'm not going to continue with this conversation, because there's a difference between like and love. And I love children, and I want them to just succeed in everything. No excuses, no exceptions. All children can learn. And it's just us believing in them and instilling that belief in them. And that's where I was. In high school, they have, what is it called? Child development, right? You have child development. I took the child development classes in high school. I worked in early childhood centers. And so I just knew that, this is where I am supposed to be, educating children, and that it would birth to educating teachers, educating leaders, and educating other people, because that was just my calling. And so, yes, I graduated from high school. I actually was the high school class president, and everything. Graduated, the top of my class, because all of that was already in me, right? That leadership and everything, and I just been walking in it for such a a long time, and so I'm just grateful that that I was able to go to Bowie, get my degree and everything, and then I started working in Title I schools. I started working in Title I schools that had high populations of Title I, as well as ELL. And so that's where I started, and I always said I wanted the children that nobody else wanted. That's always what I said. I wanted the ones that everyone else never wanted, gave up on. That's what I wanted, because I knew that with love and determination and that commitment, that I, along with others, could make an impact.
Right. All students need that type of support. They need that compassion with a mix of empathy in there as well. They all need that, but especially those students who are struggling, right? They have those areas of struggle and challenges. They need that extra support, and they need that confidence instilled in them that, hey, you can do this. You have it in you. You have those gifts and skills in you to be a success and to make it. Yes, you may have these difficulties or these challenges, but that's not going to hinder you. We're not going to let that stop you from achieving what you can achieve.
Right.
Yeah. So shifting gears from that, you start off as a teacher, you have your bachelor's degree. What made you want to go even higher, right, and get your master's, and then work in administration, and then work your way up the educational field? What made you want to do that?
It was, again, looking at the path that I was going on. I taught third grade and fifth grade. 4 years of teaching. I knew that I wanted to become an administrator, and in what capacity, a principal. And so I had to, continue to get, my master's in that, and school administration supervision, and also get the certification. And then again, looking at the path, I knew that, as the principal, I wanted to grow even more, that I didn't want to just be micro. I wanted to be macro. And macro could be meaning the system, the organization. It could mean the state. It could mean the nation. It could mean the globe, right? I wanted to grow. And so with that being said, going back to that development, I had to learn at each stage. I had to learn. I had to train. I had to develop. I had to grow in that, in the knowledge and in the grace, and become what, God said. And so with that being said, that meant that I had to go back to school. I had to obtain more degrees. I had to do certifications, and then you have to do recertifications. You have to get your certification, you got to recertify and things of that nature. So I just knew that the path that I had saw and envisioned myself on, that I needed to do that. But even though, many are the hearts and the plans of man, but only God's plan will prevail, right? And so even though with that, I was on this path, but God in 2018 violently interrupted that and said, nope, I'm putting you back on the path that I had designed. So even though I had something in my heart, only God's plan is going to prevail. And so in 2018, when I was a regional assistant superintendent in a large urban school district, with the changing of leadership, they had already had their structure and the team that they wanted at the top. And so with that being said, it was either I continue to stay there and fulfill a different role, or I could activate my faith and trust God. And so in 2018, I activated my faith and trust God. And that's when I really launched out and started the full-time work of my education consultant business.
Right. What does it mean to really surrender to God's plan for us? If he speaks it to us, what does it mean to surrender and be obedient to what he wants us to do and not what we want to do? What's your take on that?
Absolutely. My complete answer to that is a yes, that you yield to your yes. So when you say, yes, Lord, yes, to your will and to your way, I'll say, yes, Lord, yes. I will trust you and obey. When your spirit speaks to me, then my whole heart I'll agree, and my answer will be yes, Lord, yes. And that's exactly what a true surrender is that it's your whole heart. It's your mind. It's your will. It's your conscience. It's your intellect. It's everything about you that you surrender to God and you let him take full control. And what I have seen is that when I activated my faith and said that yes in 2018, that it wasn't the doors that opened, it was the windows that opened and God poured out blessings. It was that I didn't have to wait for opportunities, that they came looking for me. And so that's what a real surrender means, is that you give everything about you to God and you trust him with everything. And that's exactly what I did and what surrender means to me.
Amen. I definitely agree with that. I've never heard that analogy, open the windows. I've heard open the door. The door is open, but I never heard like windows open before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. As we continue to talk, I know I didn't bring this up earlier, but you were the 2022 Maryland Mother of the Year last year. Big accomplishment. Congratulations to you on that again.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
what has motherhood meant to you, and how has it changed your life? I know you didn't speak on it, but when you went to Bowie, you did have your son earlier when you were going through your bachelor's. But how has motherhood changed your life and changed the trajectory of how you lead and live your life?
Yeah, so, the biggest thing I think of is that when we think of motherhood, we think of what we are teaching our children, but it's really, to me, what my children are teaching me. So, like, even with my son, who I gave birth to, and my oldest son, 26, in 1997, I was in my third year of college. And so to go back to some of that, the original plan was to start school in 1994 and finish 4 years later. No, I started my school in 1994 at Bowie, and I completed my work in 2000 and graduated in 2001. So I wasn't the normal student that finished their degree in 4 years. It took me 6 years, and then I received it in 2001 because they didn't have a winter commencement at that time. And so with that being said, going back to motherhood, it's not necessarily what I mother and teach my children, but it's what they taught me. And so my son, it taught me that, no matter what, don't give up. Like, don't give up, no matter what comes in the way or what people will try to say and the things that, stacked against you. Because remember, I was the smart girl. I was the one that was the class president. I was the one that was making all the A's, but I was also the one that, and so, don't believe what people are saying. Keep working, and don't give up. So that's what motherhood taught me at that. And then I had a daughter, that's twice exceptional. And, she's twice exceptional because she had ADHD and ODD. And notice I said had, because God is a healer and he's the healing. And so I believe that God can heal anything. And so she had ADHD and ODD, but she was also gifted, and I the one, again, not, I was the teacher, I was the educator. strategies, but here it is. They're calling me at school when my daughter was in elementary school that your daughter's destroying property and, your daughter just eloped and all these different type of things. And I'm like, how can this be fair? I'm the one helping everybody else. So what did that teach me? It taught me to spend more time with your family, that you're investing too much in others and to back away from that. Your family needs you. That's what that taught. And my youngest son, who's 10, when he was, born and everything, they didn't expect him to actually, to really live because he couldn't keep his levels of oxygen when he was born. And so what did that teach me? That taught me to pray even more. That taught me to trust God even more. And now he's 10 years old and, running around. And he's like, I tell him, you're the smartest kid I ever know and things of that nature. So when I think about motherhood, even though we look at it as what are you teaching your children, I look at what did my children teach me in each aspect so that I could become a better mother for them.
Wow. I love your strength and I love your courage and your bravery to always look at things from different angles and different perspectives, not necessarily putting the focus on you, but you always look at it from another person's perspective and you always try to think outside the box and not stay in the box, but always just try to come up with those answers. And it's through prayer and it's through talking to God and seeking, his word, seeking what he's asking you to do, right? Instead of trying to come up with those answers for yourself, right? Scripture says, lean not on your own understanding. We all have certain things that we don't understand, right? But through your process, once again, of yielding and surrendering to God, he was able to provide you with that feedback and those answers that was able for you to help your children out and really see things from their perspective and have them teach you what you know now.
Exactly. Very good.
Yeah. And so with that being said, with you being a mother and everything, have those experiences helped you in your educational career also?
Absolutely. It has. I always, say what's good for my kids is good for everybody else. And so I think about where would I want my children to go to school? Where would I want my children to learn? And so even in January 2022, Cedric, I actually started homeschooling my children. And the reason I started homeschooling, again, going back to my daughter, who is twice exceptional, I did not want, and you use this analogy, I did not want anybody to keep her in the box. I wanted the whole box to just be thrown away and people to explore her gifts, to explore her, intelligence, to see what she has to offer and not limited her to the other aspects that she had. And so because I did not see that was going to take place, I decided to homeschool my daughter. And so not only did I decide to homeschool her, my son as well. And so I just wanted to give them the best, and I did not believe at that time that the best, and notice I said that time because things may shift, you know what I'm saying? But at that time, I didn't see that being offered to her. And so when I think about motherhood and when I think about what was learned, I always say what's good for my children should be good for all. And so with that, I started, my mom is my teacher homeschooling, and where I also provide resources and help to families that want to, homeschool their children or are looking for answers to better help their children that are in school and things of that nature. So it has taught me that, but also left another window open so that I can help other parents and families as well.
Right. Absolutely. Shifting gears from that, you and I were both authors. I'm sure we both have a love of writing. When did you know that you were such a big fan of writing? Was it when you were growing up as a kid, or was that something that you learned as time went on as you grew up?
It's interesting you said that because I take my mind back to Shadyside Elementary when I was in elementary school. And there was a writing instructional specialist teacher. Her name was Dr. Ida Clark. And she would always get the announcements about the writing contest. And so she would always say, Tasheka, I think you should write in this writing contest. I think you should write in this writing contest. And I wrote in my first writing contest and I won. And so I believe it was for Dr. Martin Luther King Day writing contest that the links, you got awarded something from the links that the links were having.
Yes.
And I actually won. And so after that, I would always write and then, I would always, look at how I'm writing and the one school, and her name was Lynn Evans. And then Evans went to Catholic school when she was growing up. And so she taught me about how, she used to get slapped on the hand for her writing and things like that. So really that was like another look at writing for me to help me to say, pay more attention to your writing. That you're writing, but are you writing good or are you writing well? And so she really helped me to write very well in Evans at Eastport Elementary. She was a principal there. And after that, again, just my writing just evolved. And then in 2010, when I wrote my first literary work to help me to heal, it just birthed so many other things. So not only do I have actually authored over 21 best-selling books myself, either through my own single approach to authoring it or through some published work with others through anthology, but also I help others and I coach others that may want to write a book, help them to, write books, format books, things of that nature. So it evolved from when I was a little young girl at Shadyside Elementary School. Evans corrected me on some of those grammatical things that I needed corrected. And here I am today, like I said, over 21 books. All of them are best-selling books on Amazon bestsellers, both internationally and nationally, and also helping people to birth their dreams as well.
Right. I like how you said fixing those grammatical errors and trying to do your writing the right way, because one thing I learned from my professors is that there's an art when it comes to writing, in the way you write and how you style it, the way it's supposed to be written. Those professors always got on us about those errors and stuff, making sure everything was formatted correctly. But there's a certain style of it when you are writing and how it's supposed to be looked and perceived as when people are reading it. Because when you're reading it, it should be read in a way that it makes sense. And so I liked how you touched on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so what comes next for you in your life? Do you know what's coming next for you as far as professionally, personally? What are some of the things that you're looking to achieve as we continue to go on with this year of 2023? I can't believe we're halfway through the year already, but what are some things you're looking to do?
Cedric, my next, I always say I don't know what my next is. And I say that because I realize that everything that I walk in is what God has planned and ordained. And so as I think about the year, so let me just start with this year. One thing that I do, you said it earlier, like seasons. So I have these seasons where I'm just still and I'm just quiet and I'm just listening for the voice of God to give me clarity around what he has for me to do. Most time when we get up in the morning, we don't say, God, what do you have for me to do today? God, who do you have for me to help? Or who do you have for me to, touch and reach? Who do you have for me to bless? Most time we get up and we start our day. And so really when I think about what's my next, it's really what God says. And as it relates to this year, when I look back at some of the things that God had spoke to me, how they have come to pass in fruition, how I have published and birthed a cookbook, a plant-based cookbook. And it wasn't necessarily just about the cooking and the eating, but it was about the living. And even in the beginning of the cookbook, I share my story about living and how I, started a plant-based diet because of my health. I was on 4 hypertension medicines, pre-diabetes, high cholesterol, anxiety, acid reflux, all of that, you name it. And again, God is the healer and the healing, but he gives us wisdom, and wisdom will save your life. And so through that wisdom, I learned how to eat, properly, and learn how to eat to live and not live to eat. And so, just in that, thinking about this year, how God spoke, okay, let's release this, and just some other things, being on, Fox 5, doing the daily motivation and motivating and inspiring people. And so continuing my work with Women of Virtue. So I honored the women, but I'm also going to now have, Women of Virtue brunch and a summit. And then, I always have a summer camp every year for students, and it's free, and it's a virtual summer camp called Get the Facts. And FACTS stands for Financial Literacy, Arts Integration, Christian Character Education, STEAM, and STEM. And so I provide this learning for them. And then continuing the work with the leadership and instructional coaching that is taking place and expanding that. And so with that being said, that's my next for this year. And then, of course, get to the season of where I just take those moments and just get quiet and see what God has for me next. And so, what I would like to do, I would love to expand to everything. There is a season. I think so often when we are in business for ourselves that we work in our business and we don't work on it. And so I'm at the place now where I would like to work on it and expand so that others could also be a part of this great work and we can impact even more.
Right.
So that's my next.
Right, absolutely. And so I'm asking you this before I ask you my last question. How do people decipher the certain seasons that they're in when we walk with God, right? We walk by faith and not by sight. How do people decipher those seasons that they are in so that way they know when it's time to focus on God or when it's time to focus on the work that they do? How do people decipher that?
Absolutely. So I believe the decipherness comes in the stillness. And I say this often, that your rest today will empower your tomorrow, right? And so when you look up that, think about the seasons that you're in, is this a season for me to work or is this a season for me to rest? Is this a season for me to get quiet? And one way you would know it is through what are you feeling, right? And so this is actually Simon Sinek that said, you're doing what you love, it should never cause stress, basically, to sum it up. And so when you're thinking about these seasons, if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling stressed and you're feeling, frustrated and things like that, perhaps this is not what you should be doing right now. Like perhaps you need to sit down and be still and get clarity around, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this the people that I'm supposed to be pouring in? Is this the place where I'm supposed to be sowing and investing? And my pastor, Bishop Donald Wright, who's the lead pastor at the gathering, says this often. He says, we're never to question God, but we can ask God questions. And there's a difference. Like we don't question where we are in these seasons, but we can ask questions to try to get to where we are. And to make sure that we embrace those moments and not only embrace them, but what are we learning while we're in these seasons? What are we applying? Of always trying to bounce back, that we're always in a position that we're moving forward. Our look is back does not fit for the kingdom. We should never have to look back. We should always have our hand on that plow and pushing forward and doing the work that God has called us to such a time as this.
Yes, keep moving forward. I love that. And so my last question to you,
keep moving forward.
My last question to you before I go ahead and let you go is, if you could go back in time to a young Dr. Tasheka Green, what would you say to that young girl? What type of wisdom would you instill in her to get to where she would like to go?
Absolutely. So the wisdom I would say is this: be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing, because in due season you will reap if you faint not. So don't get so anxious. Don't jump ahead. I believe it was another Martin Luther King quote that says we have to crawl before we walk, right? We have to walk before we run. And, to summarize it and everything, but don't be so anxious. Like, just take your time and just, it's worth the wait. The journey is going to be okay. And I think that if I could go back to my younger self, that's exactly what I would say. Don't be anxious. In due season, you'll reap if you faint not. Enjoy the journey and take your time, because God's promises are yes and amen.
Yes. Well, Dr. Green, thank you so much for your time. You definitely poured a lot of, motivation and wisdom into me as we were talking during this time. And so I'm sure my listeners are going to gain something from you. It's always a pleasure talking and learning from you. And I know we'll always be in touch. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you. I appreciate you. And this is a wonderful, wonderful podcast that you have. And I just pray that God will do exceedingly and abundantly above all you can ask or think, according to the power that is in you. So thank you again for this opportunity, and continue to be blessed and continue to be great.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Green. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. This wraps up the podcast, guys. Stay blessed and stay encouraged, and I'll see you guys around again.